Hello, thanks for watching Living Alongside Uncertainty, a conversation with Dr. Clare Jacobson and Dr. Zainab Noor. Firstly, a big thank you to Clare and Zainab for joining us for this event and for answering our community's questions. Before we start with the questions, I will hand over to our panel to introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Dr. Zainab Noor, but please always refer to me as Zainab. I am a specialist clinical psychologist by background, and what that means is that I've dedicated my career to supporting people with cancer.
I'm Dr. Clare Jacobson. I'm a clinical psychologist working in cancer. I've worked in paediatric cancer and adult cancer, and in 2012, I set up the Young Adult Cancer Psychology Service at London NHS Teaching Hospital. Speaking on behalf of Zainab and myself, we have a position on cancer, which is that it is not just physical, it's relational, emotional, psychological, it's spiritual, financial, political. The meanings are multiple, and those meanings change with time. We think of it as the mobile above a baby's cot. You pull one bit, and all the other bits move into a different position. That one bit could be the identified patient whose body encases the cancer. All the other bits are loved ones. Everyone holds on to a different part of the distress, and people have different coping strategies. Sometimes there are clashes between those coping strategies, but we encourage people at the very start to see those clashes as existing in the space between them and other people. It's the coping strategies clashing. It's not a fundamental problem in the relationship. And I'll give you an example. You may have one person who's coping by being very emotionally expressive. Another person feels unable to talk about it. And another person may be Googling lifestyle changes and dietary changes that could help optimize recovery and well-being. The patient might actually feel as though there's some blame towards them. That could lead to shame, and it could create a relational rupture. But actually, in a year's time, that patient may be occupying the same coping strategy as that person. So it's a dynamic process, and it shifts with time.
Thank you both. That's great. We'll now head into the questions. Thank you. So for our first question, how best to cope with feeling vulnerable after finishing treatment?
I'm taking this question. Back when I set up our young adult service, we captured data on absolutely everything, and we found that over half the referrals that came through for psychological talking therapies were in the 6-month window post end of treatment. And we understand it as that's actually when the psychological impact of cancer hits. And that makes a lot of sense intuitively. The longer I've done the work, the more that makes sense to me. I'm going to explain why in terms of 3 sections: the past, the present, and the future. So the past, there's a lot of trauma that happens in the treatment phase. And if you think about a soldier on the battlefield, they don't begin to connect to the emotion of what's happening until they're home and they feel safe. That's when they can start processing the emotions of the experience. They may feel as though people in their family and their friends don't get it, they can't relate to it, but they'll have colleagues who are there and can understand. They've got some experiential understanding. Someone who's gone through cancer often doesn't have that, particularly people who went through cancer treatment during COVID. They don't have that. They can feel incredibly isolated. And let's not forget there's a transition coming into the present where there's a withdrawal from the healthcare team who need to foster a bit of a dependency upon them during the treatment phase. And that's also the point at which the responsibility increases. You're suddenly responsible for your own healthcare, for monitoring it. And the only options available to you really then are GP or A&E if you get a spike in fever. Whereas during treatment, it was a very different setup. So that can exacerbate a feeling of vulnerability. We move to the present. A lot of people say they feel really disconnected, really unwitnessed. So what they've gone through just isn't relatable to their loved ones. They may think they understand, but it's really hard to. And that can lead to a sense of isolation and loneliness. A lot of people talk about feeling altered after treatment. And it's nuanced, it's invisible, subtle changes that go on the inside psychologically. It could be that you're getting used to living with new symptoms of brain fog that hopefully will improve, or fatigue that doesn't seem to be going anywhere, and you're figuring out your new edge. What actually can you do and can't you do? So at work, in the context of parenting, you're not quite able to do it how you used to. And renegotiating internally what that means for your sense of self-worth, that can take a real toll. And figuring out new ways that you can behave, you can work, you can parent, you can be a friend, that are in alignment with what you value about yourself when you've not got quite so much energy to give. People describe feeling like they're altered, they're a new shape. In other ways too, like in intimacy, their relationship to sex, their relationship to their own body. And there are triggers now that there weren't before. So if someone at work says they're doing a fun run for cancer and they want you to know about that, someone socially asks you a question about your body, which actually is really private and intimate, tuning into what that feels like for you and deciding quite how to respond in a way that doesn't create a relational rupture when you don't want it to, working out what your needs are and what your new needs are, figuring all that out whilst being authentic to yourself, and maybe feeling stuck in relational patterns of the past, like people pleasing or the expectations from others not quite shifting because they don't realize what's going on inside, and the demands after treatment increasing because actually you look the same as you did before, and people assume things are now okay. So I think there's a sense when you finish treatment of negotiating all that inside yourself, communicating it to others. And let's not forget, most human adults are already climbing a mountain of self-acceptance and self-compassion, trying to reach that freedom to be their authentic selves and figure out who that is. And this is like a second mountain on top of that after finishing cancer treatment. And so I think a lot of people might be drawn to a support group, something like what Target Ovarian can offer, finding like-minded people who have been through similar experiences. And that can give a real sense of belonging, validation, feeling seen, feeling understood. But actually there are some barriers that exist for people in going to those groups. Barriers like PTSD, which we can come on to if that's helpful, fear of recurrence, which we are going to talk about. And that brings me to the future. When you finish treatment, the future can feel quite overwhelming. And I think one of the things that is quite key to focus on here is people's relationship to help. Often it feels a lot safer to be the helper rather than the helpee. And if we think about things that might have happened along the journey, whether it's someone not being able to get a needle in a vein, or whether it's a GP delaying in referring at the very start, so you've got a delayed diagnosis, that really affects your trust in the healthcare system and how guarded you feel being in the patient role. I think attachment comes in here heavily because when you walk into a hospital building, you're vulnerable, you're dependent. When you walk in the building, you are the patient. You are going to have to rely on and depend on the healthcare team. And if we think about attachment, what that was like when you were a baby or a small child, and your survival depended on this caregiver who is going to tune into you and protect you and look after you, all of that is activated. You literally have to hand your body over unconscious to a surgeon, potentially. You couldn't be more vulnerable. So that attachment history is present. If someone didn't have a consistent, loving caregiver, all of that is present for them when they're in the waiting room. So knowing that they are now a patient for the long term, they're going to have to go to follow-up appointments, they're going to be monitored, they're going to be visiting the hospital in years to come. For some people, that can feel really reassuring and like they've got a caring team around them. For others, it can feel like they're locked into a dangerous power dynamic. It can feel like a straitjacket. So we need to bear all of that in mind when we're thinking about someone as they finish treatment. Zainab, is there anything you would add to that?
No, I think you've covered a lot of the things that I would have said myself, and to me, the way that I often describe it to the people that I speak to is that the kind of emotional and physical debris of the attack of cancer can be quite scattered. And so at the point of end of treatment, it doesn't mean at the point of end, as people know, doesn't mean at the point of end of you or the point of end of the chaos. And so you are at the point of then collecting your remnants of yourself. Where are you? Who are you? When are you? So these are kind of fundamental existential questions that we all struggle with, but we struggle with now more than ever at the point of end of treatment. So that's kind of how I would view it.
Thank you both. So our next question is, why do we struggle with uncertainty?
Yeah, so this question comes up often, if not always, with the people that I have conversations with. And there isn't one answer. I think the answers are multiple. But there is a answer that feels relevant that I often kind of reference, which is that do you know that human beings or the human brain really evolved to impose control on our chaotic world? It evolved to do that, to make what is unpredictable kind of predictable. And it gave us the ability to plan. And so, with that ability, we then survived, if not thrived. As a result of that particular brain's capacity to impose control where perhaps there isn't, is when we are met with uncertainty, we perceive uncertainty as triggering, as anxiety, and in other words, as fear, because that's not how we know how to plan. We crave certainty because it offers us a sense of safety in an unpredictable world. And yet, by because humans and by extension, our brain is full of contradictions, we don't always fear uncertainty. If you think about how well we tolerate a suspenseful book or a suspenseful film or an unexpected gift or exploring a new city, you're not filled with angst and disappointment and wondering what's next. You allow yourself to tolerate a certain level of uncertainty. So, my question to you is, would today be less meaningful if you knew exactly what tomorrow promised, or perhaps tomorrow wasn't promised? Would today be less meaningful? While uncertainty can feel very unsettling and brings a lot of anxiety, or what we experience as anxiety, it can also provide us with a sense of meaning into what today is about or can be about, even if tomorrow is not guaranteed, even when the outcomes are unknown. And so, my answer to you is, can you hold on to today? Can you find meaning in today despite the uncertainty of tomorrow? Can the present be for you as something that is known? And the moments within the present you can control. Can you hold on to that? Would be my answer. What do you think, Claire?
Yeah, I completely agree. And hard to do, but important to think about and acknowledge.
Thank you both for that answer. So our next question is, how can we live with uncertainty and the anxiety it can bring?
So again, this is the question that comes up all the time. So knowing that our brain imposes certainty when perhaps there isn't, you then have opportunity. With this knowledge, you can choose to view uncertainty as something that can coexist with possibility. And by doing so, you can train your brain to be mindful of the future, but be connected to the present. Often, this actually means being aware of how your body responds to things of uncertainty, which is often anxiety. Anxiety is a fluctuating state of niggling doubt. You might have increased heartbeat, You might feel your breath a bit shallow. Your hands might be clammy if you're anything like me. You might be shaking. If you're able to notice that this is a transient state that the threat of uncertainty brings onto you, you can then address your physiological state and indirectly address the uncertainty. Whatever that means to you, whether that means wanting to hold someone's hand or relaxing some tension in your body, taking a moment, distracting yourself, drinking a cold water or something warm and hot and reassuring, whatever that means to you. But a physiological state is where I would ask you to focus. Because once you control, say, your physiological stress arousal that can come with the threat of uncertainty, your mind is more able to focus on choosing. Do I want to look at the possibility or do I want to focus on the fear? That's a question for you.
Lovely. Thank you, Zainab. So our next question is how to cope not knowing what's going on inside our body.
This question is so close to my heart because I often in the kind of conversation that I have with people and what I am privileged to witness is a physical kind of manifestation of uncertainty or physical assault, as some people might call it. So when the body meets this type of threat and this type of chaos, how do you make meaning out of it? We tend to see ourselves actually reflected in our physical actions. It reinforces our sense of self as a coherent, capable being that is in control of ourselves and our environment. Our bodies, when they are altered by wound, illness, in this case, cancer, of course, it alters that reflection, not just with ourselves, but by our ability to control our external world. And this alteration invites incoherence. How is it possible that I cannot control my body and therefore my world? You see? It also invites a sense of chaos. If I don't control, what will happen to me? And so the sense of foreboding is or can be overwhelming. We are exposed in a very cruel manner to the vulnerabilities of what it is to be human, to the spectrum of that vulnerability. Worse, the way that cancer treatment actually affects the body, the kind of rapid succession of treatment and the almost kind of sudden change. If you go for surgery, you wake up one day and you've lost something. Something has changed irrevocably. And so that sudden change in what's happening with your body, you're constantly playing catch up, right? So, and I've mentioned this before, I call this emotional whiplash. You don't know what's happened to you and you're kind of really disorientated. At its core, the sense that the body, or rather the sense that people have of their body is one of betrayal. Because how can something meant to keep us safe, or indeed warn us of danger, lead us to this point? So a sense of betrayal, I think, really overcomes us. What often translates to a mistrust to one's body and its idioms of signals. And so leading us to constant surveillance of our body, or as psychologists like to call it, hypervigilance. So this constant surveillance of major or minor aches and pains itself reinforces the feeling of betrayal and the sense of lack of control. You're constantly wondering, is this ache or pain going to be terminal? Is this what's going to get me? And that enforces this kind of cycle of uncertainty and anxiety, which can be really paralyzing. You start to see your body as a betrayer and you as a prisoner. But what if, and I am inviting you to just think for a moment, what if instead of fighting the body that you think has failed you, or indeed the body that won't behave as you wish, you approached it as if you were repairing a relationship, if indeed you are feeling betrayed. What if the body could speak? What would it say about what it's been through? What would its tone be? How would it speak to you about what's happened? Might it also say that it's been mistreated by forces outside of its control? And if that is the case, how will you treat your body? How will you comfort it? How will you soothe it? And what will that do to the constant sense of surveillance? Might you then focus your attention on comforting your body alongside your mind, rather than trying to dispel and impose control? That's a question to you.
Thank you, Zainab. Our next question is, any tips for living with the fear of recurrence, not knowing if it will or when it might come back?
Cancer leaves everybody who enters remission with a fear of recurrence. It's a given, and it's something that is incredibly hard to learn to live alongside. It can spike out of the blue, but usually it spikes at moments that matter to you, moments of joy, moments of love, and times where your responsibility increases as well. And a useful way to think about it, I think, comes from a model called ACT, which I sometimes use for this. Think of it as a coin. On one side of the coin, you have the things that bring you joy, love, connection. They fill your heart. They speak to your soul. On the other side of that coin, you have vulnerability, you have fear of recurrence, you have anxiety, because you can't have one without the other. If you have one side, you have the whole coin. And what people can sometimes do, understandably, our human instinct is to try to get rid of the anxiety, get rid of the fear of recurrence, search for some certainty, search for some sense of safety. And we liken that to if you're in a swimming pool and you have a beach ball, pushing it down under the water, you're engaged in this tussle. The beach ball represents the fear of recurrence. It represents the fear, the anxiety. You're pushing it down. While you're doing that, you're fully engaged with it. You're not really able to play in the pool and do the other things. But what happens to the beach ball is it shoots back up out of the water higher than it was to begin with. So we do know that trying to suppress the fear is unrealistic, and a more I was going to say comfortable, it's not comfortable, but a more realistic way of thinking about it is imagining you're throwing a party and the fear of recurrence is the uninvited party guest. You don't want them there, but they've shown up. They're one of 20 people. You have a choice to make. Are you going to focus on trying to get this person to leave, or are you going to try and let them be there, turn the volume down in your head on their conversation, engage with other people, and try to enjoy the party? And it's a bit of a metaphor for a new relationship you're trying to build to that fear of recurrence. And it's a new relationship that relies on it relies on a new relationship to control and to fear. So thinking about control, if you imagine you're in a boat, the boat represents your life, your journey on this earth. If we stop trying to control the wind and focus on trying to control our sails, adjust our sails as the wind shifts, we're going to have an easier journey. If you think of the waves as representing the fear of recurrence, they're representing the anxiety that's inevitable. Our job is to keep our boat steady in that storm. The waves are going to come, they're going to go, they're not necessarily predictable, but we can keep our boat steady. We can anchor down, and that is your grounding, your breathing, the things that help regulate you and keep you steady. And there's also our compass point. Our compass point, the direction of travel that we have chosen, represents our values and the things that really, really matter to us. So a compass point, it's not a goal. Your value is different. The values you want to live by. It's like going north. You're never going to reach the destination north, but that's your direction of travel. And there will be currents that want to pull you west, they want to pull you east, and they're going to try and make you deviate. But take a breath, realign, refocus on what matters, and head in that direction. It's easier said than done. I appreciate that. Those compass points, those waves, they are choppy and it's difficult. But we have techniques that come from other types of therapy, actually, not necessarily ACT, just in case anyone's going to look up these types of therapy. This is a systemic technique that I find extremely useful. I ask patients to name the fear. And actually, one person who I know won't mind me mentioning this, she named it Wendy. Her and her partner named it Wendy. Wendy the worry. And you can start asking, okay, so what does Wendy sound like? What's her voice like? How big is she? How do you feel how do you know when she's in the room? How do you know when she's in that boat with you? What sorts of things does she say to you? What would you like to say back to Wendy? What would your partner say back to Wendy? What would your parent, your friend, the people who love you, what would they say back to her? What might she then say back to them? And you can do role plays with this, you can act it out. And the process here, it externalizes the fear, it helps you to defuse a little bit and see it as a fear, not a reality, not an accurate prediction. And the aim is that once you, if you run with this metaphor, once you develop those techniques, you've got your compass point, you've got your focus, you've got your techniques to let the fear live alongside you in your boat, but not dominate you. You might be able to feel the sun on your face, the wind in your hair, choose your loved ones to be in that boat with you. And so those are some of the techniques we've got.
Lovely. Thank you, Claire. So our next question is how to navigate conversations with friends and family who have their own questions and anxieties, especially children.
Yes, so I'll definitely need Claire's help here. And isn't just great that we're here to communicate together about communication. But communicating with loved ones, I feel is tricky at the best of times. But when you add cancer into the mix, it can feel like navigating really uncertain terrain. And so in my conversations with others, I often see the disappointment of not being fully or wholly understood, of not knowing exactly what to say or even how to say it. And we never fully are able to embody someone else's thoughts, feelings, or pain. There's always going to be a gap, isn't there, between what we intend and how that's perceived, or indeed what we intend and how we try and communicate what we intend. So, what we do, though, is we can recognize that there is going to be that gap. And so when we do that, we can then offer ourselves and others a little bit of grace, a little bit of forgiveness for that kind of humanity, clumsy way of talking about things that are high stakes, of talking about illness and cancer and vulnerability and anxiety and uncertainty and even death. Can we forgive the clumsy ways that we humans talk about these things? Because we really don't have very good ways to do so. And then may I offer kind of a cheat sheet for communicating, and something that I use certainly. And so rather than assuming what someone wants, or rather than assuming that someone will understand what you want, give them a menu. Ask the other person what they need, or ask or be clear about what you need. You might want validation as a result of this conversation, or you might want somebody to problem solve, another brain with you to think things through. Or you might want someone to simply witness, listen, be present with you and your pain. That's absolutely valid. Tell them what you want, or tell them what you hope to get, and then ease into the conversation. I think this approach can help with some of the tension and some of that kind of created space, and give possibly some meaningful conversations. What do you think, Claire? Can you help me?
I completely agree. I think the menu choices are a really excellent idea, and we should all remember to do that a bit more often, actually. I think my bit here is going to be talking how you talk to your children. And the first thing I'd say about this is you are the expert on your child. You know them best. You will have the gut feel of what's going to work for them. I would really encourage you to be truthful. Don't lie. Don't damage their trust in you to tell them the truth. It's painful. It can be heartbreaking. I completely agree. But withholding the truth when they're asking is damaging longer term. I would say to be guided by their questions. Usually, a child won't necessarily they won't ask a question they don't feel ready to hear the answer to, and use their reference points. The films that they've watched, the stories that they know. But the real question here is, can you avoid hurting them? And you can't. You can't shield them from the heartbreak. You can't shield them from the reality of what's coming and what's happening. But you can be in it with them. You can be a truthful voice. You can set up a narrative that makes sense to them and within the context of your family scripts, your culture, your way of communicating. And I know this, well, I don't presume to know how this may sound, but in case it's not obvious, it is not your fault. There will be blame and guilt. You may feel as though you're letting them down. It's a perfectly understandable way to feel, but it really has no place here. You are facing a threat as a family, and you are inviting them to let you in it, to be inside it with them. I would say that talking about emotions is probably quite important, knowing that they can ask you questions. Crying is okay. If they ask you a question and you cry during the conversation, that doesn't mean they've done anything wrong. They can't break you. And a useful metaphor here, I think, is the sky. If you set up that the sky is the context, that's us. We are the sky, they are the sky. The sky can hold the most powerful thunderstorm, the mightiest lightning bolts. It can be covered over with grey cloud and you can't see the blue, you can't see the sun, but all the weather will shift. There will be sunshine again. And however bad the storm is, it can't break the sky. And I think there's something about seeing parents crying, seeing parents maybe trying to hide it, but holding despair. That can be quite scary, but reminding them that you're the sky and emotions do come and go, and we're meant to feel these emotions, and it's scary right now, but we're holding hands in it together. It can be some helpful tips. But ultimately, you know your child best. And I think reach within and be confident in yourself, be confident in the bond you have with your child. You can't get it wrong.
Our next question is day-to-day strategies or techniques for managing stress and anxiety.
So I really like this question because it gives me the opportunity to distill some advice that I have been given for most of my career. And I've been lucky to have a long career. So really good opportunity to distill that advice. So just a little bit about, just a line really about stress and anxiety, and that it often comes from the body being stuck in a system of threat that is in overdrive. But here's the thing that many people may forget. You are meant to feel anxious and stressed and panicked when there is an oncoming threat or ongoing threat. So actually, your mind and your body are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. It's only that you don't want it to be doing it all the time. Well, if you're anything like me. So the key really is first starting with that understanding or that appreciation is that You are in threat mode, as I like to call it. And when you learn to observe yourself in that way, by simply learning this language, I am in threat mode, I am feeling threat, or I'm feeling anxious, or I'm having the thought that I am X, Y, and Z. Simply learning to use that language and learning where you are on the map of humanity, so to speak, you observe yourself rather than be entangled in the pain of it all. So then you learn to take one step back. And when you do that, I have 3 points of advice for you, another cheat code, if you will. So the first one is don't judge yourself. Please don't judge yourself. I see everybody coming into my clinic and they loathe the way that they're feeling. I hate myself for this. I can't believe I'm still experiencing anxiety, the very fact that I'm experiencing anxiety. And I'm disappointing others because I'm experiencing anxiety, or I can't go to work because I'm experiencing anxiety, or sadness, or pain, or illness, or anything that we associate with something that's unwanted. So don't judge yourself for it, because your feelings are valid. And you weren't the designer of your feelings. You didn't design them. This is just how our humanity works. So it's not your fault. The second thing I want you to do is remember that your feelings are not facts. What I see often is people confusing anxiety with intuition. Anxiety is not intuition. Anxiety is not predicting the future for you. Anxiety is a worst case scenario that your brain likes to think, and so it will. But anxiety is not intuition. And what that means is that you allow yourself other possibilities when you do that, when anxiety is not intuition. And so here's the third thing. Ask yourself, what does my body need to feel calmer right now? Anxiety is not intuition. Feelings are not facts. And I am in threat mode. What does my body need right now? Is it to release some tension from your muscles? Is it a hand to hold, like I mentioned earlier? What could you give yourself to give yourself a break? Whatever it is valid and necessary, and I will encourage you to do so. But these are your kind of guiding principles, those 3 things. What do you think, Claire?
I couldn't agree more. When you said about the map of humanity, there is something about it made me think of a map as a sort of circle with all these different, axes, all these different axes on them. And actually, when you look at the color spectrum, or the range of emotions we are supposed to experience, it is quite comforting to think, oh right, I'm actually over here right now, and I would prefer to be here, and other people have been here, and other people have been here, and I've been further away from where I want to be on this map before, and I've survived. And I think there's something really containing about that, and it's a sense of belonging. We are humans, like you say, the humanity in it all. I particularly liked anxiety is not intuition. And mental note to myself, I must hold on to that one.
Thank you both for your answer there. Our next question is, where can we access support to help us cope?
So I feel like we can answer this giving you a list of ways to access, right? So I could say support comes in many forms. It could be in the people close to you. It can be in support groups. It can be in the Target Ovarian website. It can be in written words. Support is a journey in meeting your need. So rather than asking yourself, where can I get support? Firstly, ask yourself, what do I need? Am I isolated? Am I lonely? Do I lack information? Or am I just afraid? So therefore, I need some soothing and comfort, and to know that I am not alone in my pain. What do you need? And from that, you can then go on your journey of finding that support. And it can be in the spaces in which you feel heard. or where you feel most heard, if not entirely heard, in the connection that you have even with yourself. Can I give myself what I need? Can I not attack myself for my humanity and my faults and my wants and my confusion? Can I be my own salvation? Can I be my own safe space? Can I be my own person? So really, we can create a list for you, but I think knowing what you need first is where to start. What do you think, Claire?
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. And to be the more practical admin part of this, I would also say you can go to your GP, you can ask your primary treatment team if there is psycho-oncology support attached. A lot of NHS trusts will have psychological support for anyone who's gone through cancer. There's a number of cancer charities as well that will provide that. And I'm sure Target Ovarian will send the links. We'll have the links on the website.
Thank you both. So our final question to bring us to a close is, what kind of strength is possible when we stop waiting for certainty?
So this is quite a reflective question. I feel that can have many different answers depending on who you are. So I'd love to hear what Claire thinks. To me, when we stop chasing certainty, it may open up other possibilities for us. Because if you think about it, you're not living for certainty, are you? Is that our main goal in life? To live because we know something inside and out? It's certainly not part of the conversations that I have with people. Certainty is a means to an end. Can you get the end? So I wonder if it's opening up other possibilities, other paths to getting to that end for you, whether that's creating meaning out of chaos, whether that's rejigging your sails, as Claire was saying, whether that's finding a different direction in life or finding a form of healing within yourself. Strength really is about recognizing that it is not certainty that you crave, but connection, companionship, safety, but safety within yourself. What do you think, Claire?
I completely agree. I would add that I agree. It's quite an open, reflective question, and we are talking to people who have gone through or are going through ovarian cancer. So I would add to that whenever you've gone through, I think any kind of cancer, but any existential threat, really, it brings for many people a clarity of focus. What really matters to me. Being able to see that maybe I've invested time and energy in things that don't serve me and don't mean that much. And that clarity increases the potential for authenticity, tuning into our own truths, our own values, what's important to us. A lot of psychologists would call this post-traumatic growth. You could call it an awakening, whatever it is, but that clarity, I think, is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to reach a more authentic sense of self. I'm really mindful that this is a platform to reach people who have gone through ovarian cancer or are going through it, and also hopefully to reach their loved ones. And I was speaking to my partner last night about doing this webinar today, and they said to me, before they knew me, they assumed cancer was a bit like a broken leg. And you'd have the treatment, you'd finish the treatment, take a few months, and you'd return to baseline. You'd recover and it would be in your past. And since meeting me, they know that's not the case. And they said, I just wonder if all the loved ones of of people who've gone through cancer actually realise that, because if they don't, it's a big one to really drum home. And I suppose it's like any big life event, you are changed. If you lose a parent, if you become a parent, when you fall in love for the first time, big life events change us profoundly in so many ways that are invisible and that we don't know instantly. We have to discover them and then communicate them. So, your loved one who has gone through cancer, they may now look the same, but don't be fooled because they are changed and their path is at a steeper incline. Their path has changed, their direction may have changed. There are multiple invisible changes, and they are figuring out how to walk through life in a very new way. So please be patient, please be flexible, be open, be curious, and together you could figure out the new dance steps.
Thank you both so much. I just want to say a massive thank you, really, for being part of this conversation today. We're so grateful for all of the insight and advice you've shared with us and our community. For those listening today, thank you for being here. We hope you found the conversation helpful and have found things to take away that might help you in the future. If you'd like to speak to someone or have any questions, you can also contact our support line on 0808 802 6000. Thanks again for joining us.